More evacuation flights are taking off from Kabul this weekend after the United States confirmed it's carried out a drone strike targeting ISIS militants who attacked the international airport in Kabul, killing at least 170 people on Thursday. American citizens have again been told to avoid the Hamid Karzai Airport today, Saturday, amid fears of another attack. Let's get the view from Amnesty International and speak to Dinushika Dissanayake, who's joining us today from Colombo. Dinushika, very good afternoon to you. Welcome to Newsfeed PM. Do you worry that the strike by the Americans attacking the ISIS militants could add fuel to an already volatile situation in Afghanistan?
We really do worry that the situation is just getting even more violent in Kabul and in Afghanistan generally. As you know, thousands continue to flock to the Hamid Karzai International Airport, trying to get on the last evacuation flights that are still leaving. And the situation really is quite dire, especially for those who are at risk. Human rights defenders, journalists, academics, and so many others who are at grave risk of reprisals by the Taliban.
The conundrum, of course, is that you've got this deadline in the main for people to be evacuated by Tuesday, that's the 31st of August, but you've also got these warnings from the United States that's saying even today, Saturday, that its citizens are advised not to approach Hamid Karzai Airport because there could be another attack. So how do you even do it? Is it safe to continue to fly people out?
I think at Amnesty International, our position has been, even on Thursday, that the deadline for evacuations should be extended. The 31st of August is an unrealistic deadline, and this will mean that so many people who need to leave can't. And as a result, given the security situation that has come up now with the attacks that took place on Thursday, and as you said, the ongoing security risks at the airport, the possibility of even those who have documents to leave, even those who have tickets and have visas, are unable to get to the airport and unable to get on those evacuation flights. And so the Taliban and the United States really must agree to supporting and protecting international human rights law and to evacuate in a way that will ensure everyone who wants to leave can leave. And therefore, extending the deadline really is important and essential at this time.
Also quite peculiar to watch in Afghanistan, especially over the last 3 days, I suppose, has been the level of cooperation between the US and other NATO forces with the Taliban, previously a sworn enemy, now to fight this ISIS-K group. How significant is that?
It really is significant given that the US was calling the Taliban an armed group, that they were fighting for 20 years in Afghanistan. And the situation has come to a point where the very people who have been abusing human rights in Afghanistan are now cooperating with the very governments that went in to protect human rights. And really it is a very, very strange situation right now, and one that is showing the international community's inability to protect the Afghan people. Thousands are trying to leave because they're at grave risk, and we can't forget them at this time. Women human rights defenders, so many have spoken up. At the UN Human Rights Council last Tuesday, so many spoke emotively, asking the international community to take action, but they didn't. They came up with a weak resolution, and as a result, we see that the Taliban is now in effective control of the country and in effective control of the lives of thousands who should be protected.
And therein lies the problem, doesn't it? Because over the past, 2 weeks now, when we saw that first extraordinary briefing to international media by the Taliban, they very much wanted to portray themselves as a more modern, more subdued group that appears to be ready to lead a government, even if it's not going to be the most democratic government, especially when you look at treatment of women and girls. It said that, yes, they'll be granted rights, but within the limits of a Sharia law framework, right? You've got that situation going on. You've also got then the United Nations agencies which are saying they've received credible reports of rights abuses by some Taliban militants. What does the group have to do to establish itself as a valid leadership structure in Afghanistan that does not abuse its citizens?
You're absolutely right. The Taliban has been using the rhetoric of coming in a different avatar of protecting human rights, of protecting women's rights. But even in the first, 13, 14 days of its effective control in Afghanistan, we've seen that it's already been abusing human rights. Human rights defenders have told us that there are door-to-door searches. Journalists have been told not to report to work, women journalists. And Amnesty International itself has recorded in July a brutal execution by the Taliban of 9 ethnic Hazara men in Ghazni province. And so we know that while they are saying that they are protecting human rights, their actions are not in order to protect human rights. And so really, I mean, the Taliban has to come to a negotiating table. It has to agree to protect human rights in terms of the international human rights law framework and women's rights in terms of the international human rights law framework. And that's why the international community must take action. At the UN Security Council, at the UN Human Rights Council, there must be a fact-finding mechanism to monitor these abuses that are taking place. And the Taliban, if it really wants to be taken seriously in terms of its assertions of protecting human rights, must agree to such a mechanism.
And you mentioned the United Nations Security Council. The Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, yesterday, Friday, said he'd written to the 5 permanent member states to invite them to a discussion to be held on Monday about the crisis in Afghanistan. But there is fear that the member states may not be pulling in the same direction on the situation in Afghanistan.
That's true, and this is why right now the member states must come together. Human rights cannot be negotiated. Everyone has a right to be protected, and the Afghan people cannot be left to the means of the Taliban at this time. It's time for the UN Security Council to come together, to pass an urgent resolution calling on the Taliban to come to the negotiating table, to agree to international human rights law protection, and to open borders, allow Afghans who want to leave either on commercial and charter flights from the Kabul airport or across land borders as they wish to leave. And I think preventing people from leaving by putting up checkpoints on the way to the airport, making people run the gauntlet of the Taliban military just to get to the checkpoints is an ongoing example of how the Taliban is restricting people's right to leave the country.
Dinushika, Dissanayake with Amnesty International. Good to speak to you this afternoon, ma'am. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.